Good morning, everyone. I'm Miriam Kalamian, author of Keto for Cancer, and thank you, Adapt Your Life, for inviting me to speak today. I am thrilled to be able to talk about what I've learned in the last decade of working with people with cancer on the ketogenic diet. I know so many of you are familiar with its other uses, but are like, I don't know, cancer, maybe that's a bridge too far, but I tell you it's not. In addition to having written that book, I'm a strong advocate for Keto for Cancer. And today what I'm going to talk about is the nuances for cancer. So 10 nuances. We're going to start with, this is a metabolic therapy that is used as an adjunct in cancer care. It is not a standalone therapy. It's really meant to be used alongside some either a conventional therapy, or for those of you who are just like not there, at least enlisting some help, medical team help with using this as an adjunct. And the reason why we're looking at this for cancer is because there is this fundamental difference in the metabolic behavior of a cancer cell when you compare it to a normal cell. And primarily we're talking about the way that cancer cells ferment glucose. So the first nuance here is, okay, when we're looking at keto, we're looking at how it can affect that fermentation, how it can change that picture and allow a cell to, a cancer cell to say, oh, no, there's something wrong with me. So I'm going to get rid of myself. The second nuance for cancer, and this is one that comes up a lot in every discussion I have with clients, we talk about protein intake. So protein intake, so for most of you, you would understand protein intake like, well, can't really go over with protein because it's going to be converted, the excess is going to be converted to sugar by the liver. And that's very true. That process of gluconeogenesis, very efficient at keeping our blood glucose level at a certain point, even if we're not taking in any carb at all. But you guys know that. So where this plays in more importantly with cancer is that these individual amino acids, particularly glutamine, can act as a fuel for directly for cancer cells, either through fermentation or by fueling other pathways, primarily within the mitochondria of even a dysfunctional cancer cell. So the other thing that happens with this excess, this abundance of amino acids, if we overconsume protein, is that amino acids are really potent signaling. So what they do is they tell all the cells in the body, when there's this abundance of nutrients, it's like, oh, it's time to grow. So yeah, everybody's going to get some of these amino acids. And in fact, some of these will stimulate the anabolic pathways related to cancer progression. So, we hear a lot about mTOR, and we hear about the IGF-1 pathway in cancer cells. These are upregulated, so their activity is increased by the mere presence of all this fuel. So that was the second nuance. Third nuance, time-restricted eating. Many of you would call this intermittent fasting, but I really like having a different term for it. This is Sachin Panda's term for it, time-restricted eating, and it's sort of an adaptation of the science behind time-restricted feeding. So when you're referring to animal models, you're talking about feeding. When you're referring to people, you're talking about eating. So time-restricted eating is keeping that small window of time, a relatively small window of time. Lots of good science behind that. You can go, I've posted on my Facebook page, Miriam Kalamian, I've posted a study on prolonged nightly fasting in women with breast cancer, and boy, is it worth reading that. So time-restricted eating, that window of time, it's not about weight loss here, but it's about autophagy. By allowing for this longer period overnight and into the next day where you're not taking in nutrients, you're giving cancer cells the opposite signal. Instead of saying, hey everybody, there's abundance, nutrients for all, it becomes austerity time, belt tightening. So a lot of you know that feeling very well. This, okay, we don't have enough nutrients to go around. So what are our priorities here? Okay, you cells, we need you to keep us alive. But you cancer cells over there, I don't know. So we're going to restrict nutrition to you and allow this time overnight to clean up dead cells, get rid of them. That's the autophagy that goes on. And it's not only helpful in cancer, it's certainly helpful just in improving metabolic health, mitochondrial metabolic health. And that is important to healthy aging. Let's not call it anti-aging. Let's just call it healthy aging, because we're all going to get there sooner or later. But we just want to be like zooming off that cliff. Fourth nuance, keep up with the science. And I'll tell you, it is overwhelming. When I look at what's happened in the decade that I've been doing this, the progress we've made in understanding these metabolic pathways is also one of the problems that we have in communicating this to the public. Because how many of you have looked at a paper, gone to a paper, looked at it, and just are overwhelmed by the number of pathways that are talked about there, and like, what does all this mean? But let me guarantee you that you don't need to understand the pathways in order to do the diet and to be able to have some good impact on your disease. So in my experience, the reading review articles is a lot more beneficial than reading individual papers on this pathway or that pathway, because we are not this pathway or that pathway. We are integrated human beings, and there's things that are going on in our body to keep us alive and to keep us functioning optimally, and that's why this ketogenic diet can be so useful in a number of disease states, because the underlying mechanism there is the same across so many different things, with obesity, diabetes, cancer, neurodegenerative disease. It's all traced back to some underlying problem that we can at least rectify to some degree by changing the mix of the foods we eat. This isn't some drastic thing where, in our evolutionary history, we have always had to make these changes based on what's available to eat in the food environment. So in keeping up with the science, one of the scary things that happens for people is every time there's a new paper that comes out that suggests that this cell or this pathway, this mutation is going to be able to use ketones, I get a flood of emails asking about this, and it always comes back to, okay, so it does that in a dish with some nutrients sprinkled on it. Is it going to do that in a living body? And okay, so the next step is the animal model. So, most likely a mouse model. So if it's doing it in the mouse model, is it going to do it in our bodies? And that's what we really don't know. That's the gap in our understanding of how to put this all together, is going from the mouse model to people. And thankfully it's happening, and people like you are collecting, saving, sharing your data. And by sharing your data, that is what is going to bring this to the tipping point. Yes, it's great to have the science there, and it's, the top down on the science, the really rigorous stuff, but the bottom up, this surge of interest in collecting and sharing data is what's going to take us over the tipping point, and we're going to be able to understand this so much better, even just a couple of years from now. It's growing exponentially. So, but one final point I want to make is there probably are some genetics that are problematic. There's one called the V600E that can use one of the ketone bodies, but that doesn't mean you have to go, oh, well, it's not going to work for me, so, or it's going to work against me, so I'm not going to, I'm not going to try to change my diet at all. Because I really still feel very strongly that if you get rid of the sugars and simple starches, the things that are fueling the cancer, primarily fueling cancer, then you are going to make an impact, a positive impact on this disease. So, so even, if you have this, maybe you don't want to become ketogenic, but certainly consider going low carb, high fat. And, by switching to burning fat as your primary fuel, I really think you could have some benefit even in cancer. And, we got to prove this out. We have to have the research. So the fifth nuance, ketone supplementation, huge in the keto world. For sports performance, it's really become a major player for that, with the ketone esters coming out. Ketone salts have been out for a while. And yeah, where do they fit in with cancer? And the answer is, of course, we don't really know. There was some work coming out of Dr. D'Agostino's lab at the University of South Florida in conjunction with a mouse model developed by Dr. Seyfried in Boston College, showed that hyperbaric oxygen, ketogenic diet, and a ketone supplement, way increased the survival of a mouse model for a really aggressive metastatic cancer. So, that's really very hopeful, but again, we need the science to take it to the next level. But what we do know about ketone supplements is that they're going to increase ketone levels, particularly in somebody who's already ketogenic. It's going to bring their ketone levels up. And in bringing the ketone levels up, you're going to have this inverse relationship that drives glucose down. And by driving glucose down, you're driving insulin down. Those are two things that are known cancer promoters. We know this. This is not speculative. We know that there's an association, okay? We know this, association between high glucose levels, hyperglycemia, and disease progression, rate of disease progression. What we don't know is, what is not universally understood is that we can make an impact on it. So there's some researchers that are going after one thing at a time to try to, to lower glucose, find this pathway, use this drug, develop a new targeted therapy that's going to cost $100,000 a year. Or maybe we just cut the sugar out of our diet, cut the starches out of our diet, change what we eat and address it at the underlying mechanism rather than what we're seeing as the result. So number 6, big one here, nuance number 6, fasting. A lot of talk about fasting in the keto world and the benefits, the metabolic benefits behind fasting. And boy, is this a mixed bag in cancer. I've had just too many people, it's heartbreaking, contact me, they've done a fast, and things are breaking down. They're not gaining the benefit of the fast. That I understand you get diagnosed with cancer, it's overwhelming, you want to take back some control, so boom, you snap yourself into a fast. And if you are already underweight, poorly nourished, even sometimes older, compromised in some way, not just by the cancer itself, but by the treatments you've undergone, fasting may not be the way to go for you. So be very careful with this step. On the other hand, if you're young, newly diagnosed, really healthy, can't believe you've been diagnosed with cancer, and you've got the muscle mass to sustain you, the fat stores to sustain you, okay, that is a great way to get yourself into ketosis and to make that good first impression on cancer cells. But it's so much easier to do once you are already in ketosis, and it may also help to preserve muscle mass. So you'll still be losing weight, but you won't be cannibalizing your muscle mass to get the protein that you need during that fast. And there are some alternatives to that, and I work with every person very closely to sort of optimize their fasting plan if they want to try that option. Number 7, nuance number 7, test your ketone levels. So many people tell me, well, I've been doing a ketogenic diet, and I'll say, well, what do your numbers look like? Well, I don't know. I don't ever look at that. I don't want a blood test. I don't want to think about it in that way. And it's like, well, but, this saying is so true that you can't manage what you don't measure. So there's two extremes. There's the people that don't measure anything. They really don't know if they're in ketosis. And then there's the people who, micromanage and are just all over this 4 or 5 times a day. And I think that can, that can backfire with raising your stress levels. If 1 time out of 4, you're not seeing some perfect number, some goal. And I get asked this a lot. So what should I be seeing in glucose and ketones? My feeling is you test before you start this program, and what you should be seeing is a reduction in glucose and now this new production of ketones. So it may not hit that theoretical therapeutic ketosis level that Dr. Seyfried has so eloquently outlined in his papers, but it still may be therapeutic. We really don't know. Again, there's this difference between the mouse model that we use and what's going on in a living organism like ourselves. Nuance number 8, dairy. So, dairy has been maligned by many, and it's been, worshipped by many. But I could tell you there's this, it's a lot easier for some people, for many people, to raise their intake of fats if they are including some high-quality dairy fats, heavy whipping cream, butter, ghee. The downside to this is we know that there are some anabolic hormones, particularly estrogens, and in dairy proteins you've got the stimulation of insulin that will actually can also raise they track together, insulin and IGF-1, and IGF-1, like I said before, is a cancer promoter. So you've got that that scenario in the body. So what do you do about dairy? Well, I would say if you have a hormone-sensitive cancer, if your cancer is known to be hormone-sensitive, if they're looking at those hormone receptors as part of your, as part of what they're going to do as an approach in conventional care, then dial it back. You may not need to eliminate dairy fats entirely, but dairy cows have been genetically modified over hundreds of years, probably thousands, who knows, to produce like a maximum amount of milk. And so they're high estrogen. They're producing their own. This is not about added hormones. They're producing huge amounts of estrogen. That estrogen is staying in that body fat of theirs. Okay, so in the fat, in the cream. And that can be problematic for people with a hormone-sensitive cancer. And guys, that includes prostate cancer. Prostate cancer is a hormone-sensitive cancer, so consider that. And again, you don't have to become phobic about eliminating it in the same way you would have to if you had an allergy to dairy. But you do have to think about dialing it back. At least I feel you have to think about dialing it back. I write a section of that in my book. And I'd be happy to send it in to anybody that contacts me. Another thing, if you do email me, and that's info@dietarytherapies.com, I will also send you it's in my book. It's a keto food list, and it's going to look really similar to what you already know, and a simple meal template, which again may be similar in a lot of ways to what you've seen about modifying the diet. But I go into some, again, the nuances for cancer, and the people that I work with have generally found this very helpful. So, and I'd be happy to share it. Nuance 9: side effects related to cancer, either as disease, the side effects that come from the disease itself, like impaired nutrition can happen very easily with colon cancer. Doesn't that make sense? Or pancreatic cancer. But also, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of side effects with the treatments that are used for cancer. A lot of them cause or really exacerbate these problems with being able to digest and absorb nutrients. So, oh God, I've got this one slide in a presentation I do, and it just sort of lines out all of the side effects that happen. And okay, so for each of those side effects, there are some conventional medical drugs that are used to treat it, but each one of those drugs has side effects as well. So to the best of your ability, being able to modify your diet to address the side effects rather than to take the drugs that the side effects of the diet are things that we know. There's this transition period that's a little rocky, but the side effects include things like improved metabolic health, lifting of brain fog, even chemo brain. Huge benefit for people with cancer. I hear that all the time. Weight loss, that it may be an unintended weight loss, but if you're heavy to start with, losing some weight's not going to be a bad thing. I mean, you look at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and they're doing this trial, newly diagnosed endometrial cancer. Okay, and they're using ketogenic diet for the first month. They're actually providing the foods. So, and then they're going to look at the tumor tissue of people following usual diet, after they do the surgery, and the tissue of women who have been ketogenic, have been on a ketogenic diet for a month, and I'll bet you they're going to find some significant differences there. But they are. I mean, they're working with women that are overweight or obese, and so when somebody comes to me with a history of, oh my God, I tried the Atkins, or I tried this or that, I tried keto and it didn't work for me, it's like, well, you got a new motivator now. The motivator is cancer, and most people see this as as a lot more important to be able to stick to the diet, sometimes to their detriment. So they may get to the point with the disease treatment or the disease progression where they are underweight, poorly nourished. There comes a time where you have to evaluate what you're doing and go, I can't afford to lose another ounce. And again, this is one of the things I do. I help people to modify the keto diet so that they really can hold on to what they have or even gain a tiny bit. But you got to understand, keto is not a weight gain diet. It's a very effective weight loss diet. So, that's one of those fine lines with cancer is like, we want this to be a benefit, not a detriment, and we don't want to encourage catabolism of healthy tissue, but we certainly don't want to encourage the anabolic activity in the cancer pathways. Fine line there. Keep your team in the loop. There are some things that are very common in cancer that your team is going to go, okay, I see this in your blood work, but it's really not an issue for us. But there are other things that are going to be red flags for them. So keep your team in the loop, even if you're not comfortable with telling them you're following a ketogenic diet. You can't do this without sharing that information with your medical team. Nuance number 10. Real important. Diet is a choice. Diet is a choice. I get so many emails from the loved ones, usually the adult children of people with cancer, and they've been on a ketogenic diet for a year. It's really enhanced their health overall. They're doing bulletproof coffee and time restricted eating, and they're just feeling so good. And then a parent gets diagnosed with cancer, and they want to get right in there with this and move their parent into ketosis and have the discussion for sure, educate, inform, but never coerce. Okay, so if your loved one does not want to make these changes, that's their decision, and you need to respect that and support them in any way that you can. But know that the knowledge you're gaining about ketosis is only going to grow over time. And the next person, and believe me, there will be a next person that is diagnosed with cancer. I mean, we're getting to the point where it's like 1 in 2 in a lifetime. Like 1 in 2 in men, 1 in 3 in women, but moving closer to 1 in 2 is going to have a cancer diagnosis in their lifetime. This is not, this is not good news for us, folks. This is not going to help us get over that cliff in good shape. This is going to, it's a tragedy. And it's a tragedy in cancer, but it's also a tragedy in neurodegenerative. You look at the incidence of Alzheimer's, and it's a tragedy in terms of our just physical well-being throughout our health lifespan. When you look at the epidemic of obesity and diabetes, and how that is degrading our quality of life over time. So, I have more information on my website, dietarytherapies.com. There's videos there, links to podcasts, my book, again, Keto for Cancer, right there, Keto for Cancer, link on my website. And I also want to mention a couple of upcoming conferences. So Low Carb USA, great people, Doug Reynolds and Pam, they are doing an amazing job with bringing people together. And West Palm Beach, January 18th through the 20th, go online and check it out. Low Carb USA, events, West Palm Beach, see what's happening. I'll be speaking there. And then an absolutely amazing gathering of the scientific minds, the Metabolic Health Summit, January 31st to February 3rd in LA. Again, go online, Metabolic Health Summit, and this is happening January 31st again to February 3rd. For both of these events, sign up quickly. I'll be speaking at both of them, I'm very proud to say. And as a final note, thank you, Adapt Your Life, for what you're doing to bring this to people worldwide. Thank you to Eric Westman for being a good friend and colleague. He's doing incredible work, keeping it simple for people, which I really love. We need to bring it back to this is all about eating food and making the right choices every time you're going to have something. You're making a choice. Is it going to support my health or not? And more people are choosing foods that are going to support their health. This is not going away, folks. Keto is not a fad diet. It's not going away. And as a final note, subscribe to this channel. So take care, folks, and bye for now.